Hi, I'm Jessica Booth. I'm the Fine Arts Program Manager at the Georgia Department of Education. You're here with me with the Professional Development for Critiquing with Kindness. We're trying to teach students to engage in meaningful art criticism. This is our Fine Arts team at the Georgia Department of Education. We're here to serve you. We do staff development that is subject specific. I have a visual and media art background, and my colleagues Paul McLean and Casey Hall have a theater and film and then music background respectively. We each do targeted staff development. They're all free and most of them are recorded so you can watch them at your leisure. I want to do a quick overview of our webinar. First, we're going to talk about art criticism and the GSE. For our viewers that are out of state or out of the country even, the GSE stands for the Georgia Standards of Excellence. Every teacher in the state of Georgia who is teaching visual and media arts, theater, film, dance, or music are required to teach the Georgia Standards of Excellence for their content areas. So we're going to talk about the link between the Georgia Standards of Excellence and all classes K through 12 in visual and media arts and art criticism standards. Then we're going to go into 3 different art criticism processes or methods. These are 3 of the more popular ones, but there are many you can choose from as an educator. And we're going to talk about how those processes fit into assessment. It can be used for diagnostic, formative, or summative assessment. And then I'm also going to link that to some of the resources that we've provided for you at the Georgia Department of Education. Regardless of what state or country you are coming to us from, you can download our free instructional frameworks and free resources, including many that cover the topic of art criticism. These are the numbers of standards related to art criticism or critical response if you're a performing arts student in the Georgia Standards of Excellence. So music has over 160, visual arts has over 120, theater has 50, dance has 60, and media arts has 40. The discrepancy in numbers has little to do with how often it is in each course and more to do with how many courses there are for each subject. Music has the most courses in our catalog, art is second. Theater, dance, and then media arts is our newest subject area and it has very few courses. So the 40 standards in media arts, for example, that are related to art criticism cover K through 8 and then 4 levels of media arts at the high school level. So it's actually quite a lot. So I'm going to talk about the subjects that are not visual media arts first, just to kind of show you that it's all across the board. Dance is the first one I'm going to talk about. So this is a dance standard from Advanced Repertoire, which is an advanced dance class in high school, that they're going to demonstrate critical and creative thinking in all aspects of dance. Then the element that they're going to work on underneath it is critiquing movement qualities and choreographic elements. With music, here's one that is from high school as well. This is advanced band. You'll notice almost all of these have RE, so it's high school, advanced band, responding, standard 2. So almost all of the art criticism standards refer to the responding domain in our standards. So this is responding to music and music performances. For theater, this one is for another high school theater class. Advanced drama, this is critiquing various aspects of theater and other media using appropriate supporting evidence. This is media arts, and the idea with this one, this is a 7th grade standard, is we're going to apply criteria to evaluate artistic work. So this is going to be analyzing work, interpreting work, and having students do written responses considering themes, ideas, does it showing a mood, and what are the goals the artist had when they intended when they created this artwork. For visual arts, this one is from 8th grade, and I just used random examples just so you could kind of get an idea. It's all over the place. So this is visual art 8th grade, responding standard number 2, critique personal works of art and the artworks of others, individually and collaboratively using a variety of approaches. So the idea is that we want students to be in middle school and above, critiquing their own artwork and being able to discuss thoughtfully in a group art. What's the purpose of an artistic critique? Art criticism can generally be divided into 2 categories. You're going to do some critiques that can even be diagnostic, therefore works in progress, and those count as formative assessments. You're also going to do critiques for finished works of art, which are summative assessments. And I think as art teachers in college, we think about the critiques we had, and they were always summative. It was always your work was at the front of the class, everyone was judging you. People would make up wild stories about their artwork, and the professor would, in some cases, talk down to you, in some cases, be very supportive about your artwork and how you can make changes to it to make it better. Now, unfortunately, the way those critiques worked is typically by the time you got to the critique, you were done with that project. There was not going to be a time for you to assess what was suggested and to go back in and rework that work. So you typically moved on. So I think that it's important for us as teachers to give students formative critiques and have them participate in formative critique in addition to summative critiques. And it might not be a bad idea for after the summative critiques, do we allow students time to work on those the issues that were pointed out during the art criticism? It makes it more valid. It makes students think that it means something. It isn't just an exercise that you go through. So the idea with an art criticism is that you're trying to provide feedback to the artist in the process of developing that work. You also, in a formative critique, want the artist to really reflect on what they're doing and critique their work as they're going and give a self-assessment. Then they can stop, retool what they're working on, and move on based on the critiques from the class. For finished works of art or summative assessments, you're kind of recording an artistic event, especially if you are working in the fourth dimension. And as a visual artist, you are doing a piece that is temporary. I think of earthworks where these things change over time, and you're critiquing that moment in time. The art critic is trying to articulate and really help keep artistic standards high for your classroom. So good art criticism in your classroom, good art critiques, should have students thinking harder about their work in process and really pushing them to make that final artwork better. Fear of critique, and I touched on this a little bit, is my remembrance of my bachelor's and my master's degree in fine arts, where you never knew what the critiques were going to be like with a new professor until you had been through them. Sometimes they were processes where you really spoke about the work. There was a dialogue between the artist and the viewers, which were the other students in the class, or with the professor. And then other times you had, unfortunately, sometimes you had professors that were demeaning and would say things during the critiques that were not only hurtful, but they were not helping develop the process of creating art. So, those hurtful critiques are having students say, I don't think this work is good. I don't think you did this, and kind of berating the person who's kind of in front of the classroom with their work on stage. Is not really a way to instill trust as a teacher, and it tears down the community in your classroom instead of building it up. So part of the reason why we created this series for criticism is that it is a standard that runs through every fine arts subject area and every grade level. And we're finding that a lot of teachers are scared to do it in such a way that it actually makes a difference in the artwork. It is sometimes skipped or glossed over, and it does have a great value if you can keep the students in a safe environment where they feel like the work they're doing in the classroom is appreciated, and that the criticism is a way to be self-aware and to grow. We're going to talk about some types of art criticism. There are many methods of art criticism. There are formal methods, there are informal methods. I'm just going to talk to you about 3 that are wildly popular and that you can find a lot more information about online. You will have done many of these, and some of them you may not have tried yet. I'm going to talk about the routine artful thinking, the visual thinking strategies, and Feldman's method of art criticism. So you, as the expert in your classroom and with your students, you're going to be the person who's responsible for differentiating this material. So you're going to have to scale it up, and how you would do art criticism with a kindergartner is very different than what you would do with a teenager in 7th grade or an AP visual arts student who's about to go to college and really needs to know how to critique in a thoughtful way. The funny thing about artful thinking routines is they're created by Harvard University's Project Zero. And there's much more information on their website that you see at the bottom of the screen that will give you in-depth handouts. They will give you routines, but that it was created for K-12 general education students. So you're in your social studies class, your teacher is talking about a photograph about the Dust Bowl era, and a teacher's learning these artful thinking routines to get students to talk about the artwork and ask questions. Ironically, it's used often by museums all across the country with adult learners. It's also used often at the university level now. So it wasn't even created for visual and media arts teachers, but that's one of the things I like to use it for. And I think it's great for formative assessment. It also has a lot of different routines. So it's nice because you can kind of switch it up a lot in your class. And then no matter what you do, the students aren't bored going, oh, we're going to do the same critique over and over and over. So this is the Artful Thinking palette. And each one of these represents a different kind of method that you could use for art criticism. So when I was still teaching middle school, would I have had my middle school students memorize all of these? Absolutely not. Just know that when you look at reasoning, there are two different methods underneath reasoning that you could use as a teacher. When you look at the blue one, which is questioning and investigating, there are 3 different routines you can use. So it is nice because it lets you jump around. So for example, if you're looking at the green one, observing and describing, you can play something called the elaboration game. And again, you can download all these from Harvard's Project Zero. So as a group, you're going to have your students describe several selections from an artwork. You're going to have a person identify a specific section and talk about what they see. Then the second person's going to go to the same section of the artwork and elaborate on it. Then the third person in the group is going to elaborate on what the first 2 people did. And then the fourth person is going to elaborate on the first 3 students. Then that fourth student gets to choose a different section of the artwork to start the process over. This gives students social emotional learning skills in working with others. And it also allows them to critically look at a piece of artwork. Another example would be the yellow one, exploring viewpoints. Well, there is a method underneath that called Circle of Viewpoints. So what Circle of Viewpoints does is you're going to brainstorm a list of different perspectives. So you're thinking about what was the artist thinking when they created this? You're going to choose a perspective to explore, and then you're going to use some sentence starters. So these are also downloadable. So I'm thinking of this topic. I'm thinking from the viewpoint of this. So you might say, how would you describe the viewpoint of your topic? You're going to be almost like an actor and take on the character of your viewpoint, and you're going to ask questions from this viewpoint. So let's say that you see Monet's water lilies and you are thinking, okay, it's a landscape. So what's the viewpoint going to be? Is it going to be an observer in a garden who paid like a botanical gardens to get in? So what's your viewpoint? Are you thinking, well, how much do these flowers cost? How is this laid out? Is this something that a landscape architect created? So that again is a different routine, a different way to look at art. So another method on the artful thinking routines would be think, puzzle, explore, which is one of the blue ones under questioning and investigating. The idea with this is you're trying to figure out, well, what do you know about this artwork? What do you know about this topic? What questions or puzzles do you have about it? This is that whole idea of like, how do students want to explore the artwork? How are you really diving in with inquiry? For the red one, which is reasoning, which is what makes you say that, and claim, support, and question are 2 of the different routines. So what makes you say that? So what's going on? What do you see? What makes you say that? How are you going to back that up? The idea is you're trying to see the links and try to get students to start thinking differently and thinking about why things are done in relationship to other parts of the artwork. So another art criticism method that we're going to talk about briefly is visual thinking strategies. VTSHome.org is the website where you can get more information about this. I also think VTS works as a great formative assessment. It's used a lot at the elementary level, or with students who are beginning artists or beginning English speakers of other languages. So it's a research method. Its whole goal is to improve critical thinking and language skills through visual images. They're using artwork to increase communication skills. They're using artwork to increase visual literacy skills where students decipher an artwork. It asks educators to facilitate learner-centered discussion. So this is where the teacher is not the source of all knowledge and kind of spouting from the front of the room. The kids are in discussion this entire time. It's going to engage learners in examining the artwork and trying to make meaning from the artwork. And it measurably increases students' observation skills, their reasoning skills, and their questioning or speculative abilities. So the easiest way to think of ETS are these three questions. What's going on in this picture, or what's going on in this artwork? If it's not a picture, it's a sculpture. What do you see that makes you say that? What more can we find? So these basic questions are really what have students sort of dive into the idea of visual thinking strategies as an art criticism method. For summative assessment, I think as a former university professor and as a high school teacher of visual arts, I often used Feldman's method of art criticism in order to kind of combat that, oh, it's art criticism day, it's not as fun as making, or I don't see a purpose in this because we never get to go back and actually finish anything or rework anything that was suggested to be reworked. It's going to be your job to facilitate this discussion. And I always took the approach, whether I was adjunct professor for many years at Georgia State University, I was a high school visual arts teacher, I was a middle school visual arts teacher prior to that. So I always tried to make Art Criticism Day a huge celebration of the work that went into the project. And we would make it fun. So when I taught middle school and high school, we made it like a gallery opening. The students were allowed to bring in snacks. They were allowed to bring in drinks. We would have little food stations set up. We would put every single person's artwork all the way around the room on the walls to make it fun. And so people could walk around and do like a cakewalk and look at each of the pieces in depth. Did we discuss every single artwork? No. Was it a place that students were allowed to kind of tear other students down or say things about their artwork that wasn't kind? No, we were only allowed to say positive things. So a big part of this is that you're setting the stage for how art criticism is going to happen in your room. If you say this is super fun and we're celebrating all the hard work you did, they will think it's super fun and they're celebrating all the hard work they did. That they get to work with their friends and that you can make it, kind of like a secret mission to decode artwork. So I'm going to do Feldman's method sort of with you with this piece by Vasily Kandinsky. It's called Composition 8. It was made in 1923. It's an oil-on canvas, and it currently resides in New York at the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum. Now, what I realized is that students don't understand what the things in the title or the byline that's underneath an artwork in a museum mean. So first things first, you're going to have to go through and say, hey, this is what this means. This means this is the artist. This is the name of the artwork. Sometimes artworks don't have names and it'll say untitled. 1923 is the year it was finished. They may have started it 7 years earlier and just kind of left it in the corner of the studio. But this was the finished year. The oil-on canvas is the medium. That's what it's created from. Geometric abstraction is on here, but that usually is not on here. And that New York and the Solomon Guggenheim Museum is where it lives right now if you want to go see it. It is not where the artist created it. It is not where it was first shown. It's where it lives right this second, so you can go see it. So these are things you're going to need to do to set the stage. Just teach them how to read the materials that are underneath an artwork so they can get as many clues as possible without having the backstory. This 4-part process is kind of a way to get students to think about art criticism, and once they know the process, it goes really quickly and they can fill in all the pieces. This is typically used at the high school and university level, also used at the middle school level with students who are used to doing art criticism, maybe 7th and 8th graders. But it ends up being a written paper, and a lot of times we talk about rigor in summative assessments in the arts. And this is one of those summative assessments that administrators really can understand because it is also strengthening students' literacy skills and their writing skills. So for the description portion, the students are going to be looking at this artwork. They're going to get most of the information they need from the tag underneath the artwork, which would be the byline, which is the artist's name, the title, the date it was created or finished, the medium, and where you can go see it right now. Then they're just going to describe what they see. What do you see? What shapes? What elements of art? And they're done. That's paragraph number 1. What's the artist's name? What's the title? What's the media used? The date it was created, and where is it now if you want to go see it, are part of that description. That's why it's important to go through how artwork is labeled in art museums and in books. So this is going to be our label. Oh, my boxes aren't coming up. Things you want to ask about the elements of art. Which ones do you see? Is there a subject matter? If there is it a portrait? Is it religious? Is it abstract? What does the piece focus on? These are all things that they're going to start decoding and looking for. So step 2 of the Feldman's process, if you think about it as another paragraph, it could be a single student writing this. It could be them as a group. Don't forget, it's up to you how you want to differentiate it. But how is the artwork organized? This is really where students start seeing how the elements of art are arranged by the principles of design. I always told my college students in arts education that think about the elements of art as the building blocks in ELA, that they are your verbs, nouns, adjectives, and pronouns. How you arrange them into sentences, paragraphs, and papers are similar to the way the elements are arranged by the principles of design. So think of the principles of design as your sentences, paragraphs, and papers. So how are the elements and principles used? Well, first they have to know what they are. Then they really have to investigate the artwork and look at it as a group and figure out what are the main elements and principles used in that piece. How are those organized to communicate a message? So we're back to our same piece with Kandinsky. They're going to look at it and start thinking about, well, what principles do I see? In addition to what elements are on there, how am I going to tell the story of what I see in the elements and principles in this piece? Then step 3 of the art criticism method is interpretation. This is the one that the kids actually had the most fun with. I always said, think about the soap opera. What's the story behind this? This is where you can infer meaning if you want to. So what's this artwork about, do you think? What do you think that Kandinsky piece is about? What message does it communicate to me? Like, what do I feel from it? But you have to back up that inferred meaning with facts that you collected during the description and analysis. So they really just have the title to go by. They can talk about the medium and maybe how that might have influenced it. Why was oil painting chosen? They can talk about any emotion they feel like the artist was communicating to them, but they have to back it up with things that they saw in the analysis and the description. So when you look at it in terms of the interpretation, you're thinking about what's the mood? Is there a meaning? And then lastly, it's going to be the judgment stage. So it's DAIJ. This is the finale. And how are you going to evaluate as a group that artwork? So there's 2 levels of judgment. There's personal. Why do you think it's successful? And I never let my students say the work was unsuccessful when they were critiquing each other's work. So that was a given. That was a rule. Like you were going to, like your group of 4, there's 32 students work up around the room. You're going to choose one piece to critique. So that means only 8 students out of 32 are going to have their work critiqued in my middle or high school classroom. The reason why is I want to make sure that they're choosing what they think is successful. In the course of a class, it seemed like almost everyone got their piece chosen at least once. But it took the fear from students that we talked about, where they're worried that their peers are going to say something negative about them, where it actually inhibits their abilities as an artist and their abilities to think creatively. So by saying it is successful, so all of the personal parts of the judgment for me in my class started with, this artwork is successful and was chosen by our group because. And then what's the aesthetic judgment? What art style fits the work the best? So is this piece realistic? Is this an abstract piece that is an abstraction of realism that shows an emotion? Or is this a non-objective work that would be considered formalism? So those are what we always think of as the aesthetic isms. And I'm going to talk about those briefly because I'm noticing a lot of teachers have difficulty when explaining that to their students. These are examples that are on the Georgia Department of Education Fine Arts website. It's the place where you signed up for this class. And they kind of show you different examples of art criticism, and they're all printable that you can use or download. So the one on the left is for second grade, and I said Feldman's model, which is the DAIJ, describe, analyze, interpret, and judge, is usually used for high school and college, and some upper level middle school. And this is a second grade example of it. Yes, it can be differentiated for lower grades. This way, instead of writing complete sentences to make paragraphs and ending up with a nice paper at the end that your administration usually can really see as a summative assessment, they're going to do a jot list. So they're still describing everything they see. They're still analyzing the elements and the principles. They're interpreting the artwork and deciding what they think it means, kind of the soap opera behind the story. And then they're deciding, what aesthetic viewpoint is this? What ism? Why is this successful? Now, the one on the right is a little bit of a different approach. This is done with a project that we have examples of called expressive figurative sculpture. It is done as a project for them to really look at expressive sculpture. So the students are going to choose a postcard or a photograph. Now, the teacher is choosing postcards and photographs or, little cutouts from the internet of expressive sculpture. So it goes with the lesson. If you were doing this with a painting lesson, you would choose different paintings that you want the students to look at because it relates to the project you're going to do. Those students are going to do a journal page or a sketchbook page, depending on what your district calls it. And they're going to have to work on lettering. They're going to lay it out however they want, but it has to have a lot of the information from the title, the byline. It's going to have a small sketch of the actual artwork. So not only is because the student's going to give that photo back, so they're going to want to have it. They're going to list 10 things they see in the artwork. They're going to list 5 things they feel about the artwork, and then a note to the artist explaining what you think about their artwork and why. Very similar to description, analysis, interpretation, and judgment of the Feldman method, but a different way it's differentiated for a lower grade level. So hopefully you can see that besides us having lots of examples of art criticism that are ready-made for you to use in your classroom, you can take these same concepts and scale them up and down. These are other examples that we have in our instructional resources that are on our website. You just download the PDF that says Visual Art Instructional Resources. And these are all for digital learning, because one of the things that happened during the time that we were in the pandemic and everyone was learning how to do traditional methods of teaching art at home with students, that really I think is going to stick around is art criticism, because what so many teachers have told me and that they've found, and I even found it when I taught at Georgia State and had some online courses that I taught, is that a lot of the students that wouldn't speak out in a critique or wouldn't be the person in their group of 4 during a Feldman's critique that wanted to do the analysis or the interpretation because they didn't want to say what they thought, they would want to do the description, really thrived on art criticism when it was online. So we also have examples of how you could do this online. And this is the part that's going to stick around, is a lot of my teachers are saying, I really think I'm still going to keep using this as a critique because my 3D kids were way more engaged when they did their ceramics critiques online. And it was so much easier for me to create a Flipgrid for my high school students where they uploaded their in-process work to get feedback from each other as a formative assessment. And it was much easier for me to grade. So the instruction on the left would be great for a lower grade level. It can also be scaled up for high school and college, but it's using a free app called Padlet to create a token response game, which is kind of where students have little stickers that they go around with and say, this is why I like this. So these are step-by-step instructions that we have in our instructional resources on how to create a Padlet to do token response, which most people have done in person. We also have step-by-step instructions on how to use another free application called Flipgrid, of how to create a Flipgrid. And Flipgrid is basically a digital bulletin board where you can post things. So you'd create a bulletin board for I Like, I Wonder, which is a riff off of the visual thinking strategies, or VTS. And students would You can do it where you upload an artwork and you have them discuss it, or they can upload their own work and discuss it. Other ideas that we have and have examples for in our instructional resources are things like having the students record an artist statement with their artwork and attaching it to a Flipgrid or attaching it to a Padlet. So as the teacher, they're submitting their final artworks in person, so you can see them because you're back in class. But also you can have them submitted online, and it makes it much easier to grade than flipping through a pile of artwork. And I taught ceramics and sculpture for a lot of my career at the high school level. You physically can't take those home to grade. You would be in your classroom till the wee hours going through it all. But if they have to submit 4 views of a sculpture in the round, on a Padlet, it sometimes makes it much easier to grade. You can use Google Slides to have them do an audio over the photographs of their work so they can tell you about it as an artist statement. There are just so many options now. And this is really the part of virtual learning that worked for art teachers. They really wanted the kids to be making with them and have all the materials at their disposal instead of whatever they had at home. But that students were more likely to be participatory in criticisms when they were online. So these are just a few resources for you to see and some examples for you to see of how this could work in your classroom. So I want to talk to you a little bit about aesthetics, because in the judgment part of Feldman's model of art criticism, which is the one that as art teachers we're taught the most, it wants you to talk about the aesthetic viewpoint that the artist is showing. And aesthetics is one of those words that we sort of get and we sort of don't. When I went to my bachelor's degree program, I took a class called aesthetics. It was counted as one of my philosophy classes. And the first day we went to school, the professor wrote on the board, "What is beauty?" And the last day of class, we were still debating that exact same question, what is beauty? Because aesthetics is a philosophy of art. Aesthetics is also much larger than that. It's a philosophy of everything, including beauty and nature, but a branch of it is philosophy of art. And it's concerned with how art is interpreted and valued. And when you're interpreting aesthetics and you're thinking about an artist's intent, we're talking about it with the 3 isms. So realism, which we have on the slide, is realistic. Abstraction, which the ism that I always learned was emotionalism, because typically something is abstracted because you want to emote with it. Or non-objective, which we were taught as formalism. Students have a hard time with realism, emotionalism, and formalism. It's just tough. It's a lot of isms. It's a lot to say. So realistic, abstract, and non-objective is also used in tandem, depending on your textbook series, if you have a textbook, or depending on how you were taught at your university. All of the artwork that we've shown are part of the permanent collection of the High Museum of Art, because they're fabulous partners with us at the Department of Education, and they allow us to use the work in their permanent collection. So this Kehinde Wiley portrait is a great example of realism that the students actually understand. We have an abstraction by Mose Tolliver, and we have an Ellsworth Kelly non-objective piece. I'm going to go through and explain a little bit about each of these so that you have an easier way to explain it to students. Because when we learned about aesthetics in school, it was emotionalism or expressivism, formalism, and realism. And those are really tough for kids. So think about realism is just realistic artwork. This is art that it imitates life. If it's supposed to be a rabbit, it looks just like a rabbit. If it's a person, it looks just like a person. There is no interpretation or like the person's green. It's the easiest for them to understand. When you think about extraction, or what I learned as emotionalism and some textbooks say is expressivism, which is even harder to say, its whole purpose of art is not to mimic everything realistically. It's to use the elements of art and the principles of design to be expressive. Abstract art has a subject matter, and students don't understand that. They see what is really non-objective art or formalistic art and say, oh, that's abstract. Abstract has a subject matter. It has just been elongated, distorted, squished, or altered in some way, whether it's color or shape, so that it is expressing an emotion of some kind. Non-objective is formalistic or formalism. Its intent is only the elements of principles of design. So it was never meant to be a bird. This piece by Sam Gilliam at the High Museum of Art was not supposed to be a rainbow. It is what it is. And that's the idea, is it is dealing with texture, it is dealing with color, and it is dealing with form. So the idea is that when students look at the artwork that you're giving them to critique, whether it's student work or it's professional work that's in relation to the project they're doing, which makes that connection for them so that they feel like it's relevant. They need in the judgment part to not just say why it's successful, but to say which ism is it? Like, what is the artist's intent? Are they trying to emote a feeling and they're trying to make me see something and feel something the way they do? Is it just about the elements and principle and they are grooving on line and working in line so that because that's what they like? Or is it realistic and they are trying to create artwork that is a copy of something in real life? One of the resources that we have in our instructional frameworks is this handout. I believe that it was a 7th grade handout originally, but there is something similar at almost every grade level. And this again is just a review for the students and for them to put it to use. Look at these artworks again from the High Museum of Art and how would you rate them? Are they realistic? Are they abstract? Are they non-objective? Students get this so much faster by using realism, abstraction, and non-objective instead of realism, emotionalism or expressivism, and formalism. This is a little bit more tangible. You are welcome to teach them all the words you want to once they get to high school, especially in the advanced classes, because then they can make those relationships themselves. As we're talking about art criticism and really all of these PD sessions, we do want you to know that yes, we're coming to you digitally now, and you can watch these whenever you want. But we also have a companion piece where we have professional learning communities online that any teacher across Georgia can join. This is Georgia specific. Our teachers who always watch our videos from out of state and out of the country, we love. But this is something that you have to have a Georgia teacher school address, email address. We have visual art professional learning communities for elementary school art, middle school art, high school art in 2-dimensional design and 3-dimensional design. So we have 4 separate teachers. They create webinars every month. I think we're up to like 9 now. And they also pose questions to the group and it's live. They answer your questions. So if you're a teacher who doesn't have a fine arts coordinator at the district level, or you don't have a mentor teacher, or you do, but they're not an art teacher, they're a 3rd grade teacher in your building, or they're the engineering teacher in your high school. This is a way for you to have a mentor and a one-on-one with a live person where you can ask them a question and they will respond to you. They also are doing PDs, much like this one, showing examples from their classroom, ways that they're doing assessments, ways they're doing classroom behavior, tips and tricks for how you pack up your art classroom at the end of the year, tips and tricks on how to teach digitally. It's all free. You just have to sign up. If you go to our website, which is Georgia Department of Education Fine Arts, the easiest way to do it is put it in a search engine and it will come up first. Scroll down until you see professional learning communities. The Georgia Department of Education's PLCs are called Community. And you just make an account, log in. It very much looks like Facebook and works like Facebook. You can share lessons with other teachers. You can pose questions and you can have feedback on lesson plans, assessments, or anything else that you ask the moderator. We hope you join us in Community. It has just kicked off and is growing every single day. It is one of the things we're the most proud of because I remember being, the only teacher at one point in a school that taught visual arts. And it was tough to not have anyone to bounce ideas off of. In contrast, I had 4 visual art teachers at the high school that I taught at. So it was great because we would brainstorm ideas and I would go, hey, I did this printmaking assignment and it didn't work. What would you do? I remember the year I was a middle school teacher by myself, and it was tough. It was really hard to not have anyone to talk to about art criticism or why this didn't work or what should I change. So this community is that for you. It is your community. We're the hosts, and we hire Georgia teachers who are, in our case, all former Teachers of the Year from the Georgia Art Education Association or Teacher of the Year nominees. And they're fabulous at what they do, delightful and funny. They're a great group of teachers. So please join us on Community. I thank you for your time today. Art criticism is a topic that we all teach, but it's not something you hear about enthusiastically that often. It's usually our studio projects that we want to share and talk to each other about. Again, my name is Jessica Booth. I'm the Fine Arts Program Manager here. We do need your feedback, so if you could quickly take your portable device, whatever phone you use, and take a snap of this QR code. It is attached to the bit.ly underneath, which is the bit.ly. It is basically a URL, so you can put in the URL, or if you know how to use QR codes, use the QR code. But the idea is it's a 4-question survey. It goes to our bosses so that they know that you enjoyed what we did and that you would like to see more. Again, thank you. I hope you have learned a little bit about art criticism or some new tools to put in your toolbox as you keep critiquing from now on. Thanks, and I'll see you again soon.